Now, it's no secret that when it comes to weathering products, I like using Vallejo stuff. I've used that a lot in the past. I got nothing against the enamel products. They just, for my style of working, I just don't like waiting for things to dry, and don't really like the odor. Just kind of, the more I use it, sometimes I get headaches. Oils are great, but again, you run into the drying time. So I like the acrylic products. The only problem I have with Vallejo is I can't get them here locally, not the weathering products. Now, I can order them from the hobby shop, and they'll, I can go pick them up when they come in, or I can order them through the mail. But sometimes that can take a few days. And every now and then I tried to order some stuff, and it would be out of stock or whatever. But what I have found is that you can find quite a few weathering products from Citadel. Now, of course, Citadel makes loads of paints, for minis and things like that. But a lot of times folks don't think about the number of products they have that are great for just general weathering. For example, in the recent, I just finished this. The video's not out yet. The video about this won't be out until January. But this Sagittar that I finished, all of that weathering is Citadel products. The mud and the mud texture and all of that is just stuff from Citadel. And I'm really starting to like using it because there is a Warhammer store here in town, and when I need some of this, I can just go pick it up because they almost always have it in stock. Now, generally for mud effects, I like using two types of products. And you can almost always find, for whatever their weathering products are, you can find the equivalent paint color. You'll notice that all of these are essentially the same color in the way they look. And generally the way it works is there will be one. The weathering products are called technical products. That distinguishes them from the layer paints and the base paints and all that. If you're not sure what it is, just look for technical paints. That's usually where their weathering stuff is. But like these two, Armageddon Dunes and Armageddon Dust, that indicates, I wish they would be a little more clear about it, but that indicates that the dust is going to be a fine-grained texture paste, whereas the Armageddon Dunes is going to be more of a heavy-grained texture paste. The same way with these Astro Granite. Astro Granite is more of a fine grain. The Astro Granite Debris is a heavier grain. And these work just like any mud product. You put some on, and then you either just leave it on and then paint over it and add other effects over it. Or you can take, my favorite method is to put some on and then take a brush that's damped in water and just kind of reduce it a bit until you get the look that you want. But between, like for example, on that Sagittar, I used this Armageddon Dunes to put down like the heavy texture layer of the mud on the underneath of it, and then, blended it in just a little bit. But that's where I got my heavier texture in various places. Then once that dried, I went back over it with Armageddon Dust. It's a lighter texture, so I was able to put it on in more places. And it still looked dirty, but not quite as textured. And then I used this Tallarn sand to do splatters and other just dusting and dust effects and things like that. And it's just paint, so there's no actual texture in it. So it stays consistent in terms of the color, and it just looks really good. Now, of course, Citadel makes these primarily for basing, putting texture on bases, but texture on base is the exact same effect as mud on a tank or a vehicle or something like that. But you can see it just goes on really easy. It's got some nice texture to it. The thing I like about this texture versus, say, the Vallejo products that I get, some of the Vallejo products almost look like they just went out and picked up grass clippings to put in some of them, and they don't quite give the texture effect that I'm looking for. Whereas this stuff, this actually acts a lot more like the Wilder texturing pastes that used to be available until Adam shut that effort down. And you know, now you've got to just, if you can find them on eBay, good luck. But these leave good texture. They dry fairly quickly, and they just look really good in terms of whether you're putting texture on a base or you're putting the mud on the model. And of course, with any mud, if this is not the color you want, that's not a problem because you can always paint over it. I mean, I could use this Astro Granite Debris here, which is actually a little heavier texture than this, in my opinion. But I could put that on a model and then paint over it. So you don't always have to find the exact same color or the exact color that you're looking for because you can always paint over it. But because these are come in a variety of colors, then you can find generally something that's close to what you're looking for. Now that was the Armageddon Dunes that I used here, and I'm just going to use some Armageddon Dust. And you can just see that it's really just a difference in texture. One has more texture than the other, and I never can remember. I usually have to do some testing. I never can remember if the dust has more texture or the dunes. And usually when I guess, I'm wrong. But I need to start putting some kind of label on the top, you know, just a number for BT and little t, big texture, little texture. But you can see the color is the same, but one's going to have a little more texture than the other. And the good thing about them is if I build them up like this so they're uneven, they tend to dry with lumpiness. They don't tend to necessarily level out as much. Some of the Vallejo products, you put them on and you're expecting to have a little more texture. You've really got to pile that stuff on to get it to work. They're not bad, but I just find these to be a little more consistent when it comes to my weathering. Now, one thing to note, whenever I'm doing any of these texture paints, I always use an old synthetic brush. This is a Vallejo number 4. It's a good brush when I first got it, but it's seen better days, so it's switched to my beat-up brushes. But I would not recommend using anything new or anything that's more expensive because the stuff will get up in here and you will eventually ruin the brush, so keep that in mind. Now here's some of that Astro Granite Debris. I've really liked this one. This is one I've just started using, and I really like it. It's a little thicker than the others, and it's got a little more debris in it. You can, you know, I mean, literally wet blend it into the other stuff, make some really interesting effects, really interesting colors. Mix these together to get the colors you want. It's just really acrylic paint with texture in it. So there's nothing fancy about what they're composed of. So you're just really working with acrylic paint with some kind of texture in it. Now I've hit this with the hairdryer, and obviously some of it is still drying where I put it on thicker over here. I could give this 45 minutes and it would be dry, perfectly ready to work with. But you can see the effect that you're going to get over here in these areas where I put it on a little thinner. It's just some really good groundwork. I don't have to go in like when I use, there's a Vallejo basing paste that I like a lot, but once I put it on, it has a lot of artificial peaks from when you're dabbing it on with your brush. And once it's on there and it's dry, you have to go in and kind of push them down. This stuff doesn't leave a lot of artificial peaks. It dries very nicely. And again, this could be mud on a base, which works perfect, or it could be mud on the tracks of a tank, or the feet of a Gunpla, or on a machining Krieger model. So it works on a lot of different scales, and it's just really quick to apply, dries really fast, and looks great. Now they've got some other products that I really like in their technical range that do some great things like this. They've got this one called Typhus Corrosion, and what this is kind of a textured rust effect. Now, it's not like dirty down rust or anything like that. You put it on, it's just this dark rusty color, but it's got a little bit of texture to it, and it dries super, super matte, which is really nice. And even though I'm putting this on a base, which isn't where you might normally use this, you put this down where you want to have some rust effects. I did this with the Umbral 6, Operative Umbral 6. In fact, let me go grab that. Now, I used that to coat those metal parts. Now, I did go back and I painted over them with various other rust-colored paints. But you can see the wonderful texture that it leaves. And quite honestly, I spent a little more time on it. But quite honestly, when I put down the typhus corrosion and then just gave it a wash of scrag brown, I really could have just stopped right there. It looked really good. And in a few places, I didn't fully paint all of the pieces because I knew a lot of them you wouldn't be able to see. And so a lot of that's up in there, and I don't know if you can necessarily see it, but a lot of that, like right over here, some over here, that's just the typhus corrosion with a little bit of a scrag brown wash. And it worked really, really good. So the typhus corrosion is one. Now, Vallejo has a product that works like this. But again, I can drive over to the Warhammer store just about any time, except for Monday and Tuesday when they're not open. I can drive over to the Warhammer store and pick this up. Whereas if I need to get it from Vallejo, I have to order it. And I mean, there's times that there's things that I need. Now, luckily, I've got enough supplies now that I usually don't run out, and I keep track of them, so I have them with me. But there have been times that I would say, oh, I needed something for basing, and I wanted a Vallejo product, but I needed to get it done for what I was doing. And I remembered, oh yeah, this Astro Granite Debris, this will work perfect. And I just headed up to the Warhammer store and grabbed it. And I swear this is not an endorsement, paid for by Games Workshop or Citadel or anything like that. But I've just found these products to be really good and really easy to use. So anyway, typhus corrosion is another one that's really good to use. Here you can see how that typhus corrosion, how matte it is when it dries. You put down some kind of orangish rust color and then stipple this over it, maybe thin down a little bit and stipple it over it. Then give it a little bit of a wash of another orange. Man, it just looks really good. So that's another great one. Like from now on, I think I'm just going to always just base my exhausts in this stuff because it just works so well for everything that comes afterwards. Now, another one that makes some of these weathering and earth effects and environment effects simple is this Valhalla Blizzard. And every time I use this stuff, I mistakenly, air quotes, mistakenly call it Van Halen Blizzard, just to be funny. And every time some kind person, and sometimes some not kind persons, message me and say, it's Valhalla Blizzard. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't know that. And it's just funnier to me every time. But, I've always heard people talk about, snow effects are so difficult and finding the right snow product for, making it look like snow and, all of these homemade solutions and things like that. I probably should have stirred this up before I tried to film this segment. But, there's all of these things. And while I'm not opposed to homemade solutions, a lot of times I just need something to get it done, working with speed. And this stuff works well too. Let me hit it with a blow dryer and show you what I mean. Now it's still a little wet. It does better to let it air dry for half an hour, 45 minutes. But you can see as it dries, it starts pulling back a little, starts tightening up a little bit. It starts looking more like slightly melted dry snow. And I really like that effect because a lot of times I don't want a complete snow base or a complete snow coverage, but I want it to look like it has snowed, but maybe it's been out in the sun, to see the ground underneath and things like that. And so this is perfect for that. It just starts pulling back a little bit. It looks like snow, but you can have groundwork underneath it showing through. It looks great to put this on top of, rocks and other things that you've put on your base. So it really works in that regard. Here's one of the Hernken Pioneers I did recently. You can see I used that Van Halen Blizzard on there. And to me, it just looks like snow. I really like that. I forgot to, but I meant to take just the tiniest bit of yellow in one area and put some like yellow snow, but I didn't. But I thought it would have been kind of funny. Now, of course, if you want a thicker snow effect, well, after it dries, you put on another layer and you can build it up and you can get it pretty much how you want it in terms of how it looks. Yeah, there are other snow products on the market, and I'm sure that there are others that probably in the end will do better. But how simple is that? One bottle, just put the stuff on. It's pretty easy to find generally because you find Citadel paints all over the place. So that's another great one to keep in mind when you're thinking of weathering products. Now another one that I really like is this Agrellan Earth. Let me show you this. You put this on and it's just kind of a, nondescript looking brown basing paste. But the effect that you're going to get, it varies depending on how thick you put it on. But let me show you what this does and then talk about some of the possibilities with it. Now I used a hairdryer to dry that, and you can see the beginnings of that crackle effect. And now using the hairdryer tends to make smaller crackles. If you let it air dry and you put it on thicker, it makes bigger stuff. But that can really lead to some great, not only groundwork, but some great mud effects. And it's also really cool to do this, to base something, say with typhus corrosion, let that dry, put this over it, let it crackle, and then do some orange and yellowish rust colors over it. And it really makes that rust effect, where metal starts just flaking and corroding. You can use that for rust effects or anything like that. It's just a really, really cool product to use. And there's so many applications beyond just making something look like dried, textured earth. Now, certainly I would not say, throw out your weathering products. And if you have ones that you like using them, hey, keep using them. But the next time you're looking for something, or if you've not used any weathering products and you're trying to decide on something to use, these are some generally easy to find, quick to use, easy to work with, water-based. You can thin them with water, do whatever you want with them, and they dry quickly. They're just some great products to use, so I highly recommend them for any level of user, whether you're just beginning in weathering or you've been doing it for a long time. I've used a lot of weathering products over the years, and more, these are becoming my go-to because they're just so quick, so easy to use, and I really find them to be a lot of fun. So I hope this has given you some information to maybe chew on and think about, and maybe help you in your own weathering. As always, thanks so much for being a patron. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.